many, if not most, of the games we create indulge in some form of power fantasy. A fantasy of having power or skill or influence beyond anything that we could realistically achieve in this world. But there's one problem with a true, raw power fantasy. To really deliver on that, the player must always be right. I mean, it wouldn't be a very effective power fantasy if, as you were running and gunning along, murdering everything in sight, some guy popped out of the bushes to say, "Record scratch! Hey buddy, hello. So, tell me what you're doing." I'm rampaging? Sure, but no, tell me, what are you doing though? I mean, It would be a buzzkill, because in many of these power fantasy games, stopping to think about what you're actually doing in the context of the story often reveals your character to be kind of a psychopath, or at least a jerk. Okay, I wouldn't be the first to point out that the original Uncharted's Nathan Drake murders hordes of people just because they're standing between him and some money. He's presented as the roguish hero Han Solo type in-game, but really, the lovable scamp's only there to find a treasure, and he guns down hundreds of people to get it. But it doesn't have to be about mass murder, even. Consider RPGs like The Elder Scrolls, where we can, and do, sneak around looting all of the peasants blind. It is satisfying and extremely fun to do. Of course, realistically, my actions would almost certainly send entire villages spiraling into starvation and even more desperate poverty. It's quite probable that scores of people would be falsely accused of my crimes and hanged. But thinking about that quickly breaks the fantasy, so, understandably, it doesn't really get brought up. And a lot of the time, especially in the Elder Scrolls case where that scenario falls way outside the core experience, that is honestly fine. Not every game is obligated to second-guess its fictional premise. Miyamoto says jump on those mushmen to save the princess from the turtle, and we say can do. But given that we have built so much of our industry on delivering this power fantasy type of experience, it does concern me just a little bit that we've all embraced this unspoken rule that power fantasies are ruined by self-examination. That merely questioning the rightness of what the player is doing, stopping for just 1 second to ask, wait a minute, are we the baddies? Would just completely shatter the fantasy and drive players away. Now, you might argue that, hey, there are some power fantasy games out there where it's made obvious that the things you're doing are evil. And that's true. But while those games do make you evil, I would argue that they don't make you wrong. Those games aren't about questioning the heroism of your actions. They're just about going, woohoo, I'm evil now. It's not about examining the ramifications of what you're doing. It's just embracing the cartoonish supervillain flavor of power fantasy. Here's the thing. I think players can handle that self-examination. And again, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It doesn't even need to happen in every game. But I'm willing to bet that having some character ask, hey, did we do the right thing here? After mowing down thousands of sentient beings would not break the experience at all. And what's more, the answer to that question can even be yes. It is totally legitimate to ask that question and then to answer, yes, whatever our specific cause is worth the cost. Maybe that's the stance you want your game to take. Or maybe it's just the stance that character in question would take. The answer isn't important. What matters is the self-examination. Superhero comics started getting a lot better once they started asking these questions. Science fiction got a lot better once it started asking these questions. Heck, even Game of Thrones is built on having characters face these questions. I sometimes worry that this lack of self-examination, this unquestioning assumption of being in the right, has kind of bled into our culture a bit. Because it associates being wrong with being weak, and critical examination of what you're doing with being in some way attacked. It creates this idea that conscience is a check on power. It's not, though. James spoke with a few friends who spent much of their time serving in the military, and one of them said that really examining and understanding why he was there and what he was fighting for is what gave him the strength to do impossible things day after day for years at a time. More than that the ability to see the flaws, the things that weren't right, allowed him to conduct himself in such a way that made things better. And every time he didn't think he could get through one more day of it, that is what he would try to remind himself. But even more than that, if we never stop to examine, how are we going to grow? It's only by stopping to look at our situation that we have the opportunity to spot problems. And it's only by being willing to admit that things aren't perfect or that we might have been wrong that we're able to become better. And come on, games are the perfect medium for that sort of self-examination, because we're participating in the actions occurring on the screen. They are our own choices. And I don't believe that gamers are so delicate that having 1 or 2 lines asking us to step back and consider what we're doing in play is going to somehow shatter the joys of these incredible gaming power fantasies. I mean, do we really want game companies to think we're that fragile? Did moments of self-examination ruin Logan or Captain America Civil War? Did they somehow wreck Battlestar Galactica or Babylon 5? Did they instantly turn us against Rogue One? Actually, heck, I don't even have to look to other media for this. A few games were already brave enough to try it. Did moments of self-examination ruin The Witcher 3? Or Bloodborne? Mass Effect 2? Battlefield 1? Listen, even with a tiny bit of self-examination, we can still feel powerful and awesome, and we can still totally enjoy our power fantasies. And avoiding that tiny bit of self-examination only does us a disservice. It denies us some of the incredible experiences that can come from just that little bit of additional meaning. Without it, we miss out on all of that nuance and that variation that other media have enjoyed. It's what gave them all kinds of interesting new stories. We can handle it, we're grown up. We don't always have to be right. See you next week.